and we are the co-founders of Dipper.
Dipper is a technology platform that guides professionals of color to a better workplace, one review at a time.
Dipper is your safe space. It is the time for you to share your voice with a community that you are a part of. Visit us and join today at ourdipper.com.
Welcome to all of our viewers. Welcome to our incredible guests. Welcome to the virtual launch of ourdipper.com. We are hosting virtual events throughout April, and we do have a surprise that we'll share next time. Please join us every Tuesday and Thursday this month to participate in our Shut Up and Listen themed events. Each event will feature top DEI thought leaders to discuss engaging topics impacting workplace culture. Now, this is an amazing and perfect opportunity to share more about Dipper. Dipper is a tech platform for all people of color, Black, Brown, Asian, and Indigenous professionals of all levels, including C-suite, to rate and review their workplaces. Members have profiles and can access the inside scoop on which companies to join and stay away from. And members can also engage with our and other members on Dipper's newsfeed. So today we will be discussing, are you ready? What workplace accountability looks like. First, let us introduce our influential guests, Michelle Kim and Tara Furiani. So I'll start off with Michelle Kim, and my partner Jacinta will introduce Tara. Michelle Kim is an entrepreneur, writer, speaker, and activist for DEI work. She is co-founder of Awaken and founder and CEO of Michelle Kim Consulting. She aims to make her consulting practice experiential and hopes to spark personal and organizational change. For example, when Michelle is working with clients that are struggling to have difficult conversations, she tries to get them to reframe the narrative by explaining that usually what they are finding challenging is that something about themselves is being challenged. I love that. She aims to shift their perspective by explaining that marginalized communities feel the same way when their identity is being challenged in the workplace. And she hopes this humanizes marginalized communities and builds empathy in a productive manner. On to you, Jacinta.
Thanks so much, Netta. And again, good afternoon, everyone. And we're really excited to have both of you on today. And Tara is the founder and CEO of Not the HR Lady, which is a people consulting agency. She co-authored the book called F Your Office Snacks, which I have said that out loud before, and is co-host of a podcast called Not the HR Lady. Tara was exposed to the torment of racism as a child as she observed how her family was treated. She was adopted by a white mother and a Black father and has a Black brother. And in 1998, she was driving home with her brother and they were pulled over by the police. The officer thought the two of them were dating and called her brother the N-word, told Tara she was an N-word lover, and suggested that she stay away from thugs so she does not get raped. Tara wanted to defend herself and her brother, but her brother gave her a look, which I'm sure you'll always remember, that told her to be silent so that they could get home alive. In Tara's own words, that was the day that she realized her white privilege. And so we are super excited to dive in with both of these influential women to share their voices with us today. And let's talk a bit more about workplace accountability. So I'll dive into the first question, and both of you can feel free to answer as you see fit. We want to hear from both of you as much as we can in this short period of time. So what inspired you both to create your own DEI consulting agencies?
Michelle, do you want to go first?
Go ahead.
So for me, it's I have been in the people space, and I was a corporate chief people officer for 12 years. I've been in the world of work for 20 of those 12 years, but 12 years in the C-suite. And when COVID kind of happened, it was this amazing juxtaposition of I was already doing Not the HR Lady. We were just getting ready to launch at HR Transform in Las Vegas when the world of work kind of shut down. And I intended, obviously, everything I've done has been intentional, but my first and I think widest reaching goal was exactly that, to be more wide reaching with the work that I was doing. I've been fortunate enough to been employed by organizations who recognize the value that people, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, an end to the BS, and hiring me to bring that in for their organization. But I realized I could affect a lot more if I did that louder and for everybody to see and hear, and to work with organizations who are, earlier on their journeys than some of the ones I've worked with during my actual professional corporate career. So it's always been my passion. You told the story of my childhood, and that's obviously been a huge and influential part of the work I started doing when I first entered the world of work in, the year 2000. And I've been doing it ever since. So it seemed natural for me at this point, after having had the experience, after having had built up a network of just great other people who are partners and thought leaders and mentors in the space, to really start sharing my voice in a louder and a wider way. And then lo and behold, COVID actually sort of helped propel that to some degree, because people started paying attention finally. And here we are. And I couldn't be happier to be a part of this journey. And I'm so excited for your launch, because I think it is so important for people of color to be represented in the workplace and to give real, honest feedback about what organizations are doing specific to this. So I'm so happy to be here. My journey is aligned with yours and fairly new going out on my own.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And Michelle, we'd love to hear more about your journey in the space.
Absolutely. And I think my journey really needs to bring about some context around me and my own identities. Because before I started Awaken, I was at multiple tech companies. And before that, I was in consulting. And before that, I was doing social justice activism work. And as a queer woman, as a Korean American immigrant, as somebody who had a father who was undocumented for over 10 years, my initial entry into D&I work was really through social justice work. And I think it's important that we don't think of DEI as some corporatized vacuum work, right? That it so often is diluted and whitewashed and risk-free. That my experience of being in the corporate space after having spent years doing organizing work really struck me with a lot of cognitive dissonance. And I think that is also really harmful. And my motivation for starting Awaken with a group of folks was that we wanted to close that dissonance for the most marginalized people in the workplace, and also recognizing that there is a ton of risk associated with doing this work in a particular way if you are employed and are getting paid by that institution. And that strategically, it felt necessary for me to be an external voice that can be more honest and blunt about the work that needs to be done, and also to take on that burden of risk off of the shoulders of the most marginalized people inside these workplaces. I think another piece that was really important for me personally was having a team that was being led by people holding those marginalized identities, right? So our team being BIPOC, queer, trans people led, for me is a really important piece of this work as well.
Right. Thank you both. I love that, both of you had some personal experiences that you went through, and you took that, because that's trauma. And what I always say is this journey and this process is also healing in the work that we do as well. Knowing that both of you are able to touch so many people. right? And I admire both of you because you are very blunt and direct about what you need to say. And there is a lot of risk in that, right? And so to be able to say, well, I'm going to take this burden off of other marginalized folks, because we see that happen often within the workplace. It's always people from underrepresented groups that are trying to create the impact and the change. So that really leads me into my next question. What policies and practices can organizations put in place to really better hold themselves accountable? And that's for both of you. Oh, I think you're on mute, Tara.
I think she should go first.
I was afraid of Michelle to go first.
Yeah, no, I think I like to usually talk about accountability and make sure that we're all on the same page. Because I think that term gets thrown around a lot without shared understanding of what we actually mean. And I think accountability also gets conflated with consequence or even punishment, rather than really, for me, the way that I define it, I borrow from definitions of other folks who are doing this work, and particularly Mia Mingus is somebody that I really respect and admire, who's a disability justice activist. And a Korean adoptee. And she talks about accountability in 4 parts that it requires. In order for somebody to actually practice accountability, there needs to be self-reflection, there needs to be apology, there needs to be repair, there needs to be changed behavior. And this is in the context of harm. And I think that when it comes to accountability, it's really difficult for us to hold people accountable if there's actually no desire to practice repair and change behavior over time. So when we say, let's hold these leaders accountable, let's hold these companies accountable, what we're essentially trying to do is, without mutual agreement that that is the outcome that we want, we are wanting to see consequence from inaction or from an action that is harmful. And I don't think that is an effective place for us to continue to find ourselves in. I actually think that we need to start practicing accountability way before harm occurs and way before something doesn't happen when it needed to happen. And we need to have an honest conversation about, is there a willingness to practice accountability proactively on the part of the leaders? Because we already have laws that forbid discrimination, and yet discrimination is happening every single day. Right?
Yeah.
We have policies that ban harassment, and yet harassment and microaggressions are happening everywhere. So it's not that we just need to put down policies in place. We actually need to have changed spirit that needs to allow folks to want to, and that as a collective, we can practice accountability and to be able to recognize our own complicity all the time. And I think just sort of going through a list of policies is also a short-term relief, right? Like we feel, I know a lot of folks who do policy work understand the importance of that being met with the change of systemic culture that allows for that policies to actually be adhered to and enforced. Because it doesn't matter if we have a long list of policies if no one really gives a shit, right? And if people, I think it's about that plus the permissiveness of our culture that needs to be challenged and changed in order for any policies to actually stick.
Yeah.
Nothing matters. Yeah, to Michelle's point, nothing matters. You can have every policy, every handbook, every manual, every poster, every law, and unless you actually have a true desire to make a change within your organization, you're not gonna. Like, it's just, I hate to say it so brutally, but Michelle said it perfectly. I mean, if you can have anything you want, but unless there's an actual wanting to affect change, it's all for naught. You might as well just burn it because it doesn't mean anything.
Right. Well, thank you both for sharing that, because I think a lot of organizations, you probably all get that question pretty often. What policies should we put in, right?
Yeah.
Processes.
There's no checkbox. There's no checkbox.
Yeah.
Look, there's not a checkbox. There's not a sticker you get after you complete X number of DEI activities. Like, come on, this is not how it works.
Right. Well, I'm so happy that folks that are watching this and that will replay this and watch it will understand. No matter what you put in place, if you are not willing to kind of lay the groundwork, the foundational work, those policies won't work, because many organizations ask about that. So thank you both for that.
Yeah. And I love that also the note about it having to be proactive.
Yeah.
Like a lot of times the policies are reactive and in response to foul behavior, right? And so it's how do you create this culture? I know culture is used in the workplace a lot. How do you create this environment where you're not having to address problems, but you're actually eliminating them before they even happen? So, and even to talk a bit more about that, and I know, is there any advice that you would give to a professional that wants to speak out about a problem related to DEI that they are seeing or have experienced themselves in the workplace, but they are afraid because of retaliation? And we hear that a lot. So I'm really curious, from the perspective of both of you, if there's any advice you'd have for these individuals.
I'm a no silent allies kind of person, but I understand fear in the workplace because it has cost people jobs. It has cost me jobs. There's a real interesting, I think, balance that happens at work where you want to do the right thing and you want to say the right thing and you want to support other people. And at the same time, you've watched other people say something and they're not there anymore. And that can be incredibly daunting, especially when you're, newer into your career. So when you get older and jaded, like so many of us are now, you're like, sorry, I'm not going to take it anymore. You can't act like you can't act like this. So my advice, but I'll tame it back a little for people who maybe haven't found their voice or don't have the opportunity to necessarily think that they can say something without fear of retribution or retaliation or straight up losing their job. You have to, though. Like, especially if you're somebody who looks like me, if you are somebody who appears to be white, if you are somebody who has white privilege, and men, I'm especially talking to you white guys, you have a real opportunity here to aid everybody in checking other people who look at you and will hear those words. And it's a really unfortunate place to be in, but that's the reality of it, is that how you can really hold yourself, your company, and each other accountable is checking each other, particularly if you're in a place of privilege, particularly if you're in the group that work was designed for, which is just white cis males. And that's just the reality of it. Don't believe me, fact check me with the Constitution. We don't have any amendments for white men, I don't think, last I checked. So it's a really, I think, easy thing to do that's incredibly hard for some people. But the thing is that the workplace will never change without all of us calling out the bad behavior that happens, particularly to marginalized groups, particularly to people who are not in a position to do anything about it. I've worked for organizations and with organizations, much to my long regret, that have said the words to me, it doesn't matter. We have more money than them. We'll just keep it tied up in a lawsuit. What are they going to do? They're going to run out of money before we will. And that is the harsh reality of what happens in the world of work. But the more of us who speak out against it, the more of us who don't sign those NDAs, who can speak freely, you have the ability to really affect change and call out some of this BS that we've dealt with, that so many of us have experienced.
Oof, powerful.
Love it.
And what you're talking about there is collective power, right? When people can come together, and we see that happening now, right? With all the bad that's happening, we're seeing that, especially people from underrepresented communities, we're trying to find each other, right? Where's my Asian sister? Where's my Asian brother? Where's my Black sister? Where's my Black brother? Right? Like, we're trying to find each other because we understand the disparity that exists and the trauma that exists. And we know that if we come together as a collective, there's more power in that. Love to hear.
Yeah, I think, I'm glad, Tara, you're talking about the responsibility of calling out harm being put on white folks and white men, because I think the reality is that there are real material repercussions and penalty faced by disproportionately Black and brown folks, women, marginalized people of all identities. And kind of tying back to the policy part, before we even get to building equitable, inclusive policies, I wonder if there are opportunities for us to undo racist policies that uphold systems of white supremacy, right? So things like having the NDA be the, negotiating bait for being able to get a severance package, right? Like those types of policies are incredibly violent. And when it comes to policies that prefer hiring certain people with pedigrees that look like this, or, I think there are so many different policies and procedures that actually need to be dismantled first before we even start building on top of it or changing it. And acknowledging and understanding that these have lasting impacts to how we operate as an organization. And, the negative repercussion piece too is that needs to be really looked at in terms of how do we ensure that there is real safety for folks who speak out. And there is this a culture of solidarity that can also come when somebody speaks out, so they're not standing alone in the fire, right? And taking all the heat. So I think that there are many points that you brought up that I think are valid. And I think it's important for us to also recognize that everybody has to practice their own agency in understanding their own boundaries and risks, depending on their identities, right? Some folks may not be able to take that much risk because of the fact that there is so much toxicity and violent retaliation that are expected for certain individuals of marginalized identities. And then we have to think about how do we redistribute that risk so that folks who are able to take more risks are actually taking those risks instead of being complicit in staying silent.
Yeah. Again, thank you both for dropping such incredible gems. My next question is, DEI work is emotionally labor intensive. Let me take a deep breath. Take a deep breath one more time. All right. Can you share what you find most exhausting and what keeps you energized?
I think for me, it's repetition, right? It's so exhausting to try to illustrate the same point over and over and over again.
As per my last email.
Exactly. It is so per my last email. That I find just to be so mentally taxing. And then the folks who still battle on the all lives matter nonsense, like the stuff that's just ridiculous, the yeah, but the but it's like, stop it, you're hurting my head. I don't like it at all. That drives me crazy. Like, I am all for educating, but if you're just being contrary to be contrary, stop. Like, you sound like a jerk, and I don't know how else to explain that to you. So now I just block them, especially that I find them so much now on LinkedIn. But man, like, I want to educate. I want to teach and get people to just get it. But sometimes you're just like, they're never going to get there because they're a racist POS, and I can't get through it. I can't do anything about it. I can't change their upbringing and so that's it.
Yeah, no, you're spot on with that. That's the reality. Some people are not going to get it. And it's okay. Leave them in their little racist world, right? Yeah. The ones that want to shift their behaviors and traits, they'll get it. The ones that don't, you're going to stay to the side as the world continues to move on and change rapidly.
Back to the basics.
Exactly. But on that note, Michelle, get your thoughts.
Oh man, I mean, where do we even start, right? Because this work is, it really is challenging on all of us, especially in times of trauma. And the trauma is ongoing and never ending. And especially for me right now, the increasing anti-Asian violence, and at the same time trying to fast process my own trauma in order for me to be able to hold space for other folks and to educate. And y'all have been doing the same thing. I think that is just the cruel reality that we're in, that we are never truly afforded the space to heal, because the same type of violence keeps recurring. And we are being asked to work through our trauma in order to hold other people's trauma, right? And to solve that in such an intellectualized way that is also toxic. So that's exhausting in the midst of all of what, Tara, you said. And I think I see a lot of folks also really trying to convince people to care when there isn't a desire to care. And I think that's also exhausting. The continual disappointment that folks feel on the part of their leaders and people who say they care, but they don't, or they don't show up in alignment with their words and the promises publicly. I think that's also exhausting and creates a lot of dissonance. So there's a lot of things that are exhausting, but also I wouldn't be doing this work if I didn't believe that change is possible. And even though it's cliche, I truly do hold onto a lot of good stories that I have had, where I do see people genuinely wanting to see change, and people who are working in solidarity, and people who are accessing joy during this time, right? And I think that sense of community is so important in keeping us going. It is for me, in addition to just, day in, day out, being committed to doing this work, and allowing ourselves to also not forget that part of this work is about us claiming joy and levity for ourselves.
Yeah. That's so beautiful. Thank you to both of you again for dropping incredible gems. One of our viewers said, super important to look at undoing policies. We can't build a strong house on a broken foundation. So love that. And folks are saying both of you are dropping bombs.
I know. And I loved the, accessing your joy. Cause I'm like, access it, activate it, go. Like you can't, we can't forget through all the trauma, hurt, pain that we have a responsibility to ourselves to just find things that bring us joy, that spark joy, and and really connect to that and connect to that community. And this did it for me. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, to all professionals of color, connect with us on ourdipper.com right now by signing up and completing your profile on ourdipper.com so that we can unpack all of the gems that our guests dropped today. Also, be sure to rate and review all companies that you have worked for on ourdipper.com. Thank you for joining, and we hope to hear from you soon. Take care.
Thank you.